The afternoon sun fell over the streets of Madrid when Elena walked toward the small corner cafe. Her worn shoes made a soft sound against the wet pavement. In her right hand, she held the last coins she had left, counting them over and over with the hope that somehow they would be enough for something more than a simple sandwich. Elena had lost her job as a cleaner 3 weeks ago. The building where she worked had closed for renovations, and they promised to call her when they reopened. But weeks passed without news. Her savings had quickly been exhausted, paying rent for her small apartment and basic bills. Now she had to choose between eating or having electricity. The cafe was full of people. Office workers grabbed their quick coffee before returning to work. University students occupied tables with their books, and some tourists consulted their maps while drinking hot tea. Elena headed to the counter, where Mrs. Carmen, the owner of the place, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Elena. The usual?" asked Carmen, knowing that the young woman always ordered the cheapest item on the menu. "Yes, please," Elena responded with a soft voice, placing the coins on the counter. While waiting for her order, she heard a tense conversation near the cash register. A tall man, dressed in a simple gray jacket, was desperately searching through all his pockets. "This can't be," he muttered to himself. He was sure he had brought his wallet. The man was about 40 years old, brown hair with some gray at the temples, and an expression of genuine concern on his face. He didn't seem to be someone accustomed to finding himself in difficult situations, but there he was, unable to pay for the coffee and sandwich he had ordered. The cashier, a part-time university student, began to get impatient. "Sir, if you can't pay, I'll have to cancel your order. There are more people waiting." Some people in line began to murmur. An elegant woman commented loudly that it was shameful not to bring enough money. A businessman checked his watch with evident irritation. Elena observed the scene and felt something familiar in her chest. She recognized that feeling of humiliation, that vulnerability of being in public without the basic means for something as simple as buying food. Without thinking twice, she approached the counter. "Excuse me," Elena said to the cashier, her voice barely audible above the noise of the cafe. "I can pay for him." She placed her last coins on the counter, the same coins she had been saving for her own food. The cashier counted them quickly and nodded. The man turned toward Elena with an expression of absolute surprise. His eyes, a deep hazel color, met hers, and for a moment, the bustle of the cafe seemed to fade away. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You don't know me." Elena smiled softly. "We've all been in difficult situations at some point. It's nothing." But clearly it was something. Elena now had no money for her own food, but there was something in the man's expression that told her that her gesture had meant more than she could imagine. "My name is Alexander," he said, extending his hand, "and I owe you much more than the price of a coffee." "Elena," she responded, shaking his hand, "and you don't owe me anything." Alexander insisted that she at least let him invite her to sit with him. Elena initially resisted, knowing she had no money to order anything else, but Alexander had already asked the cashier to prepare another sandwich and coffee. "I can't let you pay for my food too," Elena protested. Alexander looked at her with an intensity that made her feel uncomfortable. "It's the least I can do, please." They sat at a small table near the window. The late afternoon light created a warm atmosphere, and for the first time in weeks, Elena allowed herself to relax a little. "What do you do, Elena?" Alexander asked, genuinely interested. Elena hesitated. She didn't want to seem pathetic, but she didn't want to lie either. "I used to work as a cleaner, but the building closed temporarily. I'm looking for something new. Alexander nodded understandingly. Honest work always deserves respect. Has it been difficult? Elena laughed softly, but there was sadness in her laughter. Some days are harder than others. Today was one of the difficult ones. She didn't know why she was telling this to a stranger, but there was something in the way Alexander listened that made her feel safe. There was no judgment in his eyes, only genuine attention. "And you?" Elena asked. "What do you do?" Alexander took a sip of his coffee before responding. "I work in business. Nothing very exciting." Elena noticed that he was vague in his response, but didn't press. Each person had the right to their privacy. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging comments about the weather or the coffee. Elena realized that Alexander had a way of making the simplest conversations feel important. He asked about her opinions, about her dreams, about the small things that made her happy. "What do you like to do in your free time?" he asked. Elena smiled, this time with more sincerity. "I like to read. I go to the municipal library when I can, and walk in the park on Sundays. It's free and beautiful." Alexander listened to her as if each word was fascinating. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such honesty about such simple pleasures. "And what kind of books do you like?" "A little bit of everything," Elena responded. "Novels, biographies, cookbooks, even though I can't afford to make the recipes. I like learning new things." Alexander felt something move in his chest. This woman, who had just spent her last coins on a stranger, talked about cookbooks she couldn't afford to cook with a genuine smile. There was no bitterness in her, only a quiet acceptance of circumstances. "Elena," he said after a moment, "there's something I need to tell you." Elena looked at him expectantly. "What you did today, paying for my food, was extraordinary. Not many people would have done that, especially when clearly every coin counts for you." Elena shrugged modestly. Any decent person would have done the same. "No," Alexander said firmly, "that's not true. I've lived long enough to know that true kindness is rare." Something in his tone made Elena look at him more closely. There was a depth in his words that suggested experiences that went beyond simply forgetting a wallet. Time passed without them realizing it. The cafe began to empty as dinner time approached. Elena realized she had been talking with Alexander for more than 2 hours, the most pleasant period she had had in months. "I should go," Elena said finally, looking at the clock on the wall. "May I walk with you?" Alexander asked. Elena nodded, and they left the cafe together. The streets of Madrid were beautiful at sunset, with the lights beginning to turn on and people heading home after work. They walked slowly, as if neither of them wanted the afternoon to end. Alexander pointed out interesting buildings, shared stories about different parts of the city, and Elena found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. When they arrived at the modest apartment building where Elena lived, she stopped at the entrance. "Thank you for the afternoon, Alexander. I haven't had such a pleasant conversation in a long time." Alexander looked at her intensely. "Elena, may I see you tomorrow?" Elena felt butterflies in her stomach. Why would this obviously educated and interesting man want to spend more time with her? "I don't know if it's a good idea," she responded honestly. "Our lives are very different." Alexander stepped closer. "Precisely for that reason, I'd like to get to know you better. You've shown me something today that I had forgotten existed." "What's that?" "Kindness without ulterior motive," he replied simply. Elena felt her heart race. "All right, but this time I choose the place." "Perfect," Alexander said, with a smile that completely transformed his face. The next day, Elena waited for Alexander at the entrance to Retiro Park. She had chosen this place because it was free, beautiful, and neutral ground where she would feel more comfortable. Alexander arrived punctually, dressed more casually than the day before. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, but there was still something in his posture that suggested a more privileged life than he let on. They walked through the park paths, fed the ducks in the pond, and sat on a bench under a large tree. Elena showed him her favorite spot, a small area where she often came to read. "It's perfect," Alexander said, looking around. "I can see why you come here." Elena had brought a book, a romance novel she had borrowed from the library. Alexander asked her to read a little to her, and she agreed shyly. While Elena read, Alexander watched her. There was a grace in the way she held the book, a passion in her voice when she read exciting dialogues. She was beautiful in a natural way, without elaborate makeup or expensive clothes, but with an inner light that made her radiant. After a while, Elena closed the book and looked at him. "Your turn. Tell me something about yourself that you haven't told me." Alexander tensed slightly. It was the question he had been dreading, but he knew it was fair. "It's complicated, Elena. My life isn't exactly as it seems." Elena waited patiently, without pressing. "I work in a family business," Alexander continued, "a very large business. Sometimes I feel trapped in a world where everything revolves around money and appearances." Elena nodded understandingly. It must be difficult to feel trapped in any situation. Alexander looked at her with admiration. Anyone else would have asked more questions about the business, about the money, but Elena had simply recognized his basic human feeling. The days began to pass, and it became routine for Elena and Alexander to meet, sometimes in the park, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes just walking through the streets of Madrid. Elena began to look forward to these encounters more than anything else in her day. Alexander, for his part, began to see the world through Elena's eyes. She showed him public libraries where she spent hours reading, local markets where she knew all the vendors by name, small churches where she sometimes went to find peace. One day, while walking near the royal palace, Elena stopped abruptly. "Alexander," she said, her voice serious, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Alexander felt a knot in his stomach. "Of course." "Why are you spending time with me? We're from different worlds. You clearly have more opportunities, more options. What do you see in me?" Alexander stopped and faced her completely. "Elena, in the last few days, you've shown me more about what it means to be truly rich than all the years of my previous life." "What do you mean?" "Elena, you're rich in the things that really matter. You're rich in kindness, in contentment, in the ability to find joy in simple things. I've spent years surrounded by people who only care about what they can get from me." "And what do I get from you?" Elena asked softly. Alexander smiled sadly. "I hope honest company. I hope someone who values you for who you really are." Elena felt tears form in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. There was something in the way Alexander spoke, in the things he didn't say, that made her suspect there was more to his story than he had revealed. The next day, she decided to do something she normally would never have done. She went to the library and searched for information about large family businesses in Madrid. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she had a hunch. After an hour of searching, she found an article in a business magazine that made her heart stop. The photo showed a man in an expensive suit, smiling at what appeared to be an elegant event. The man was clearly Alexander, but he looked different, more formal, more distant. The article identified him as Alexander Mendoza, heir and CEO of Grupo Mendoza, one of the largest companies in Spain, with interests in real estate, technology, and manufacturing. His personal fortune was estimated at several hundred million euros. Elena sat in the library, staring at the article, feeling as if the ground had moved beneath her feet. The man she had met, who had shared cheap coffee with her, who walked through public parks and listened to her stories about cleaning jobs, was one of the richest men in Spain. She felt betrayed, confused, and strangely hurt. Why hadn't he told her the truth? Was this some kind of experiment for him? A way to entertain himself with the lives of ordinary people? That afternoon, when Alexander arrived at the place where they had agreed to meet, Elena was waiting for him with the article in her hands. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" she asked without preamble. Alexander saw the article and his face paled. "Elena, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me all these days? That I'm some kind of charity project for you?" "No," Alexander said firmly, approaching her. "It's nothing like that." "Then what is it? Alexander, do you know what it feels like to be judged solely by your bank account? Do you know what it feels like to have people who fake affection just to get something from you?" Elena looked at him, her anger mixing with understanding. "Alexander, I didn't know anything about your money. Everything I felt for you was real." "And that's why I didn't tell you the truth," he replied. "For the first time in years, someone saw me for who I really am, not for what I have." Elena sat on a nearby bench, processing all the information. Alexander sat next to her, but keeping distance. "Elena, when you paid for my coffee that day, you had no idea who I was. You treated me like any human being who needed help. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Elena looked at him. "But you lied to me." "I didn't lie," Alexander said. "I simply didn't reveal the whole truth. And I did it because I was afraid you would change, like everyone else changes when they find out about the money." "Change how?" Alexander sighed deeply. "Elena, I've had people who pretended to love me just to access my fortune. I've had friends who became completely different when they learned about my inheritance. I've had relationships that turned into business transactions." Elena felt her anger slowly fade, replaced by something more complex. She could see the genuine pain in Alexander's eyes. "But now you know," she said softly. "What changes?" Alexander looked at her intensely. "That depends on you. Does it change anything for you?" Elena thought for a long moment. She remembered all the conversations they had had, all the times Alexander had listened to her stories without judgment, all the times he had made her feel valued and interesting. "It doesn't change who you are," she said finally, "but it changes the circumstances." "What do you mean?" Elena stood up and began walking slowly. Alexander followed her. "It means that I'm an unemployed woman living in a tiny apartment and counting coins to eat, and you're a multimillionaire. Those are realities we can't ignore." "Elena, money doesn't change feelings." "No, but it changes everything else," Elena replied. "It changes expectations, it changes dynamics, it changes available options." They stopped under a streetlight that had just turned on at dusk. "Elena," Alexander said, taking her hands gently, "I've been thinking a lot about this, about us." Elena felt her heart race. "I want to do something for you. I want to help you." Elena withdrew her hands immediately. "I don't want your charity, Alexander." "It's not charity," he protested. "It's more than that." "Then what is it?" Alexander took a deep breath. "Elena, I think I've fallen in love with you." Elena felt as if the world had stopped. The words floated between them in the cool night air. Alexander continued, his voice trembling slightly. "In these weeks, you've shown me what generosity, kindness, joy, and simple things really means. You've made me remember who I really want to be." Elena looked at him, feeling tears form in her eyes. "Alexander, I've also developed feelings for you, but this is complicated." "It doesn't have to be," he said. "Elena, I want you to work with me." "As an employee?" she asked, her voice cold. "No, as a partner. Elena, I've seen your intelligence, your understanding of people, your integrity. I want you to help me change how my company operates. I want you to help me make a real difference in the world." Elena remained silent, overwhelmed by the proposal. "And more than that," Alexander continued, "I want you to consider building a life with me. Not because I have money, but because I believe together we could be better than we are separately." Elena began walking again, needing movement to process everything.
"Alexander, do you realize how overwhelming this is? A week ago, I was worried about whether I could afford electricity this month. Now you're talking to me about being a partner in a multi-million-dollar company." "I understand," Alexander said, "and I don't expect an immediate answer. I just want you to know that my feelings are real, and my offers are genuine." They arrived at Elena's building. She stopped at the entrance, as she had done so many times before, but this time, everything felt different. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course, take all the time you need." Elena went up to her apartment and sat on her small sofa, looking out the window toward the street where Alexander was probably still standing. Her world had completely changed in the space of a few hours. The following days were the most difficult of Elena's life. She couldn't stop thinking about Alexander, about his words, about the possibilities and complications he represented. There was part of her that was excited about the opportunity to never worry about money again, to have the financial security she had only dreamed of. But there was another part that was terrified of losing her independence, of becoming someone who depended on another. On the third day, she decided to go to the cafe where they had met. Carmen greeted her warmly. "Where have you been, girl? I haven't seen you in days." Elena told Carmen the whole story, who listened with growing amazement. "My God, Elena, that elegant man who was here with you was really Alexander Mendoza?" Elena nodded. Carmen sat next to her. "Elena, that man looks at you like you're the only woman in the world. I saw how he looked at you that day. It wasn't the look of someone playing a game." "But how can I be sure he won't change when things become real?" Elena asked. Carmen smiled wisely. "Girl, did you change when you found out about his money?" Elena thought. Not really. He was still the same Alexander she had met and fallen in love with. Then why do you think he would change? That night, Elena made a decision. She sent Alexander a message asking him to meet her the next day. They met at the same park bench where they had spent so many happy hours. Alexander looked nervous, as if he knew this conversation would determine their future. "Alexander," Elena began, "I've been thinking a lot about everything." He nodded, waiting. "You're right about one thing. Feelings are real, and they shouldn't be dismissed just because of circumstances."
Alexander felt a spark of hope. "But you also have to understand my perspective. All my life, I've depended only on myself. The idea of suddenly depending on someone else, especially someone so different from me, is terrifying." "I understand completely," Alexander said. "So, I have a proposal for you," Elena continued. "I'm willing to explore this, both the feelings and the professional opportunities, but I need to do it gradually, at my own pace." Alexander smiled. "Whatever you need. That means I start working for your company in a real role, with a real salary, earning my place. No favors, no special treatment because we're romantically involved." Alexander nodded vigorously. "Of course. And it means we take things slowly in the personal aspect, too. I want to be sure that what we feel can survive in the real world, not just in the bubble we've created. Elena, Alexander said, taking her hand, I'm willing to wait as long as you need. Just knowing you're willing to try is more than I dared to expect. Elena smiled, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. So, when do I start working? Alexander laughed. How about Monday? The following months were a period of adjustment for both. Elena started working in the Human Resources Department of Grupo Mendoza, where her genuine understanding of employee struggles proved invaluable. Alexander, for his part, began implementing changes in how the company treated its entry-level employees. He increased minimum wages, implemented better health benefits, and created professional development programs. Personally, Elena and Alexander continued building their relationship slowly. Elena kept her apartment for the first 6 months, insisting on maintaining her independence while they explored their feelings. One afternoon, while reviewing proposals for a new educational scholarship program that Elena had suggested, Alexander looked at her with admiration. You know, that day at the cafe, when you paid for my food, you saved me from more than just the embarrassment of not being able to pay. What do you mean? Elena asked. You saved me from becoming someone who had completely forgotten how to feel real gratitude, how to value genuine kindness. Elena smiled. And you saved me from thinking I would have to face all of life's challenges completely alone.
A year after their first encounter, Elena and Alexander were back at the same cafe where they had met. This time, however, Elena wore a ring on her finger, and they had news to share with Carmen. "We're getting married," Elena announced, radiant with happiness. Carmen screamed with joy and hugged them both. "I knew from the first day there was something special between you two." While celebrating with coffee and pastries, Elena reflected on how her life had changed. Not just financially, although she now had more security than she had ever imagined, but emotionally and spiritually. She had learned that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest consequences, that genuine kindness is rewarded in unexpected ways, and that real love can flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. Alexander, for his part, had rediscovered what it meant to live with purpose beyond simply accumulating wealth. Together with Elena, he had transformed his company into a model of corporate social responsibility, creating meaningful jobs and supporting needy communities. But more important than all of that, he had found someone who loved him for who he really was, not for what he possessed. As they left the cafe that afternoon, Elena stopped and looked back. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked. "I was just thinking," she replied, "about how everything changed with a few coins and a moment of kindness." Alexander kissed her softly. "The best investment I've ever made," he said, "were those coins you spent on me." Elena laughed. "Technically, I made that investment." "And you got the best possible return," Alexander replied, smiling. They walked toward their future together, knowing they had found something more valuable than all the money in the world. They had found true love, built on a foundation of mutual kindness, respect, and the understanding that the best things in life cannot be bought. The story of Elena and Alexander became legend in that little cafe. Carmen often told it to other customers, especially those who seemed to be going through difficult times, reminding them that they never know when a small act of kindness might change not only another person's life, but their own as well. And so, what began as a simple gesture from a generous woman toward a stranger in need became a story of love, transformation, and proof that true wealth is found in kind hearts and genuine human connections. 2 years after their wedding, Elena and Alexander had established the Hope Foundation, a charitable organization that provided microloans and educational support to people in situations similar to those Elena had faced. The main office was located in the same neighborhood where Elena had lived during her most difficult days, and she insisted it be accessible to the local community. Every morning, Elena walked through the same streets she had traveled when she counted coins to eat. But now she had a different purpose, finding ways to help others who faced similar challenges. "Good morning, Mrs. Helena," greeted Mrs. Maria, an elderly woman who sold flowers on the corner. "Good morning, Mrs. Maria. How is your granddaughter? Was she able to enroll in university?" "Yes, thanks to your foundation's scholarship. I can't thank you enough." These interactions filled Elena's heart more than any luxury her new position could have provided. She had learned that true satisfaction came from using her resources to create opportunities for others. At the foundation office, Elena reviewed applications from people seeking support. Each story reminded her of her own journey. There were single mothers working multiple jobs, brilliant students without resources to continue their education, and older workers who had lost their jobs due to automation. Alexander, meanwhile, had completely revolutionized Grupo Mendoza. The company was now internationally recognized not only for its financial success, but for its ethical practices and commitment to social responsibility. He had implemented a program where a percentage of all profits automatically went to community initiatives. One afternoon, while Elena was interviewing a young woman named Sophia who was seeking funding to open a small bakery, she saw something familiar in the girl's eyes. It was the same mixture of hope and desperation she had felt years earlier. "Tell me about your business plan, Sophia," Elena said in a gentle voice. Sophia, nervous but determined, explained how she had been working in a bakery since she was 16, learning the trade, saving every possible penny. Her dream was to open her own place in her neighborhood, where working people could buy fresh bread at affordable prices. "And what's your biggest challenge now?" Elena asked. "I don't have collateral for a bank loan. No one in my family has property or significant savings. Banks see my age, my lack of formal business education, and reject me immediately." Elena felt an echo of her own experiences. She remembered all the times she had been judged by her appearance, her address, her lack of connections. "Sophia," Elena said, leaning forward, "I want you to tell me not just about your business plan, but about why you really want to do this." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Mrs. Elena, in my neighborhood, people work very hard. They leave early, return late, and deserve to have access to fresh, quality food without having to spend a fortune or travel far. I want to create a place that's more than a bakery. I want it to be a place where the community feels valued." Elena smiled, seeing in Sophia the same passion and determination that had driven her own journey. After the interview, Elena called Alexander. "I think I've found someone special," she told him. "Another story like ours?" Alexander asked with a smile in his voice. "Different, but equally inspiring. This young woman reminds me that there are so many people with incredible potential who just need an opportunity." That night, Elena and Alexander discussed Sophia's case during dinner at their home, an elegant but cozy house they had designed to be a space where they could receive both company executives and foundation beneficiaries. "You know what I love about this?" Alexander said. "Each person we help becomes proof that circumstances don't define potential." Elena nodded. "And each success reminds us why we do this." Sophia's bakery opened 6 months later. Elena and Alexander were guests of honor at the inauguration. The small place was full of neighbors, families with children, workers who stopped to buy their breakfast before work. Sophia received them with tears in her eyes. "Without you, this would have remained just a dream." Elena hugged the young woman. "Sophia, this is the result of your hard work and your vision. We just provided the tools." While tasting the freshly baked bread and watching the joy on customers' faces, Elena felt overwhelmed by a feeling of completed purpose. This was exactly the kind of impact she had dreamed of creating. However, not everything in her new life had been easy. Elena had had to navigate complex social situations, high society events where some people looked at her with curiosity or skepticism. She had learned to maintain her authenticity while adapting to social expectations that often seemed superficial to her. At a particularly elegant charity gala, Elena found herself in a conversation with several wives of prominent businessmen. One of them, Christina Vega, had made subtly condescending comments all evening. "Elena, dear, it's admirable how you've managed to adapt to this world," Christina said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elena maintained her composure. "Thank you, Christina. Although I must say I haven't tried to adapt as much as I've tried to maintain the values that have always been important to me." Another woman in the group, Patricia Morales, intervened. "Elena, I've heard wonderful things about your foundation. How do you decide whom to help?" Elena perked up, talking about something she was truly passionate about. "We look for people who have solid plans, real determination, and who commit to giving back to their communities. It's not about traditional charity, but about investing in human potential." Christina frowned slightly. "Aren't you worried that some people will take advantage of your generosity?" Elena looked at her directly. "Christina, I've learned that when you treat people with respect and give them real opportunities, the vast majority respond with integrity. Distrust toward those in need often says more about the one expressing it than about those who need help." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Patricia, who quickly changed the subject. But Elena felt she had made an important point. Later that night, as she and Alexander returned home, he asked her about the conversation. "Was it difficult?" he asked, having noticed the tension. "Sometimes," Elena replied, "but I realized something important tonight. I no longer feel intimidated by people like Christina. I've found my voice in this world." Alexander took her hand. "That's one of the things I most admire about you. You've never allowed circumstances to change who you are fundamentally." Elena smiled, "Although I have learned to use the salad fork correctly." They both laughed, remembering the first months of their relationship, when Elena had been terrified of making social mistakes at formal events. The 3rd anniversary of their first meeting was approaching, and Elena had been planning something special. She wanted to return to the cafe where they had met, but this time with a bigger purpose. "Carmen," Elena said when she visited the cafe a week before the anniversary, "I want to ask you something important." Carmen, now in her 60s, smiled warmly. "Tell me, my girl." "Would you like to expand the cafe? Turn it into something bigger?" Carmen was perplexed. "Elena, this place has been my life for 20 years, but I don't have the resources for something like that." Elena smiled mysteriously. "What would you say if I offered you a partnership? You keep full ownership and control of the place, but we provide the funds to expand and create a community space." "A community space?" "Imagine it, Carmen. The cafe would remain exactly as it is, but we could add an area where people can take free computer classes, where students can study, where single parents can bring their children while they work, a place that nourishes both the body and spirit of the community." Carmen put her hands to her heart. "Elena, are you serious?" "Completely. This place was where our story began. We want to make sure it continues to be a place where other beautiful stories can begin." On their anniversary day, Elena and Alexander arrived at the renovated cafe. Carmen had accepted the proposal enthusiastically,
and in just a few weeks the place had been transformed. It maintained its original charm, but now included a small library, computers for public use, and a children's play area. Elena and Alexander sat at the same table where they had shared their first meal together. The place was full of life. A mother was helping her son with homework while having coffee. A group of elderly people played dominoes in a corner, and two university students discussed a project while sharing pastries. "Do you remember what you were thinking that first day?" Alexander asked. Elena laughed softly. "I thought you were a nice man who had had a bad day. I never imagined you would change my whole life." "And what do you think now?" Elena looked around the bustling cafe, then at Alexander. "I think sometimes the universe has bigger plans than we can imagine. That day, I thought I was simply helping a stranger buy coffee. In reality, I was investing in our future together and in the future of all these people." Alexander took her hand across the table. "Elena, there's something I've never told you about that day." "What?" "I had come to this cafe specifically because I was considering selling the company. I felt disconnected from everything, without real purpose. I had lost my wallet on purpose." Elena looked at him with surprise. "On purpose?" "Well, not exactly. But when I realized I had forgotten it, part of me felt relieved. It was an excuse not to have to pretend to be someone I wasn't, at least for a moment. So when I paid for your food, you showed me that there was still genuine goodness in the world. You gave me a reason to believe it was worth continuing, that there were ways to live with real purpose." Elena felt tears form in her eyes. "Alexander, your life had value long before we met." "I know that now," he replied. "But that day, you reminded me." As the sun began to set, Elena and Alexander prepared to leave. Carmen approached their table. "Before you go, I have something for you." She handed them a small envelope. Inside was a photo that Carmen had secretly taken during their first encounter. It showed Elena placing the coins on the counter while Alexander looked at her with an expression of amazement and gratitude. "I've kept it all these years," Carmen said. "I knew someday you'd want to have it." Elena studied the photo, seeing in it the exact moment when their lives had changed forever. "It's perfect, Carmen. Thank you." As they walked home that night, Elena reflected on everything she had learned in recent years. She had learned that real wealth wasn't measured in numbers in a bank account, but in the depth of relationships, the satisfaction of meaningful work, and the joy of contributing to others' well-being. She had also learned that true love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone with whom she could create something beautiful together. Alexander, for his part, had rediscovered that the most meaningful success came from using his resources to create opportunities for others, and that the companionship of someone who loved him unconditionally was more valuable than all the luxuries in the world. That night, as they prepared for sleep, Elena looked at the photo Carmen had given them. "You know what's most beautiful about this photo?" she asked Alexander. "What?" "It shows the exact moment when two strangers decided to trust each other. You trusted in accepting help, and I trusted in offering it." Alexander came closer and embraced her, and that mutual trust became the foundation of everything we've built together. Elena closed her eyes, feeling a deep peace. In a few years, she had gone from being a woman who counted coins to survive to being someone who could change lives. But more important than that, she had found her place in the world. She had found her purpose, and she had found love. The story of Elena and Alexander would continue to unfold in the years to come. They would have children who would grow up understanding both the value of money and the importance of generosity. They would expand their foundation internationally. Elena would eventually write a book about her experience,
inspiring millions of people around the world. But at the heart of everything would always be that simple moment in a modest cafe when a generous woman decided to help a stranger, not knowing she was planting the seeds of a transformation that would change not only their own lives, but the lives of thousands of people they didn't yet know. Kindness, Elena had learned, was the most powerful investment a person could make. And the return on that investment was immeasurable. Love, purpose, community, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that her life had made a real difference in the world. Years continued to pass, and the Hope Foundation grew beyond what Elena and Alexander had ever imagined. What started as a local initiative in Madrid had expanded to cities across Spain, then to other countries in Europe, and eventually to developing nations around the world. Each new location followed the same principle: identify people with genuine potential and provide them not with handouts, but with opportunities to build better lives for themselves and their communities. Elena often traveled to visit these international branches. In a small village in Kenya, she met with women who had used microloans to start textile cooperatives. In rural Guatemala, she saw how educational scholarships had enabled entire families to break cycles of poverty. In the Philippines, she witnessed former street vendors who had grown their small businesses into thriving enterprises that employed dozens of people. But perhaps the most meaningful expansion was right back where it all began. The community space at Carmen's Cafe had become a model that was replicated in neighborhoods throughout Madrid. Each location maintained the same warm, welcoming atmosphere while providing essential services: job training, financial literacy classes, childcare for working parents, and meeting spaces for local organizations. Carmen, now in her 70s but still energetic, had become something of a celebrity in her own right. Journalists and social workers from around the world visited her cafe to understand how a simple coffee shop had become the heart of community transformation. She always told them the same thing: it started with one person caring enough to help another, even when she had almost nothing to give. On a particularly busy Thursday morning, Carmen was serving coffee to her regular customers when a young man approached the counter. He was well-dressed but looked nervous, checking his pockets repeatedly. "I'm sorry," he said to the cashier, a college student named Miguel who had been working there part-time for 2 years. "I can't find my wallet. I was sure I had it with me." Carmen looked up from the espresso machine she was cleaning and smiled. She had seen this scene before, though not quite in the same way. "Don't worry about it," she told the young man. "Today, your coffee is on the house." "But I can pay," he insisted. "I have money, I just forgot my wallet at home." Carmen walked over to him, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. "Young man, do you know the story of this place?" He shook his head, confused. Carmen gestured around the bustling cafe, where people were studying, working on laptops, children were reading in the corner library, and elderly neighbors were playing cards. This all started because a young woman spent her last coins to buy coffee for a stranger. She had no idea who he was, but she saw someone who needed help, and she helped. The young man listened, intrigued despite his embarrassment. That act of kindness changed both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. So when someone forgets their wallet in my cafe, well, I like to think we're keeping that spirit alive. She handed him a steaming cup of coffee and a fresh pastry. Sometimes the universe puts us in situations where we can either receive kindness or offer it. Today, you're receiving it. Maybe tomorrow, you'll have a chance to offer it to someone else. The young man thanked her profusely and took a seat by the window. Carmen watched him for a moment, wondering if she had just witnessed another beginning, another small moment that might ripple outward in unexpected ways. Meanwhile, Alina was in her office at the Foundation's headquarters, reviewing the annual impact report that would soon be presented to their board of directors. The numbers were staggering in the best possible way. Over 50,000 people had received direct assistance through their programs, with a success rate of 92% in terms of participants achieving their stated goals. But more impressive than the statistics were the stories behind them. There was Marcus, a former homeless veteran in London who had used a small business loan to start a bicycle repair service and now employed 6 other veterans. There was Amara, a refugee from Syria who had parlayed a scholarship into a medical degree and was now providing healthcare in underserved communities. There was Giuseppe, an elderly man in Naples who had lost his job at age 58 and used foundation training programs to become a master craftsman, teaching traditional woodworking to young apprentices. Each story reminded Elena of her own journey, but they also showed her something else. Kindness was indeed contagious. Many of their program graduates went on to help others in their communities, creating expanding circles of positive impact that far exceeded what the foundation could have achieved on its own. Alexander knocked on her office door and entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafe downstairs. Even in their modern headquarters building, they had insisted on having a small cafe that operated on the same principles as Carmen's original: excellent coffee, affordable prices, and a welcoming atmosphere for everyone. "Looking at the impact report?" he asked, setting 1 cup on her desk. Elena nodded. "Every year, I'm amazed by what people can accomplish when they're given real opportunities." Alexander sat down across from her. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" "What's that?"
That day, when you paid for my coffee, you probably thought you were just being kind to someone having a bad day. You had no way of knowing it would lead to all this." He gestured toward the report and out the window toward the city where their programs were operating. Elena smiled. "I've been thinking about that too. It makes me wonder how many other small moments of kindness are happening right now that will turn into something bigger than anyone can imagine." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Their relationship had deepened and matured over the years, weathering the challenges that came with building something meaningful together. They had learned to balance their individual strengths: Elena's intuitive understanding of human nature and ability to connect with people from all walks of life, and Alexander's strategic thinking and ability to scale their impact through efficient systems and partnerships. Their marriage was strong not just because they loved each other, but because they shared a sense of purpose that went beyond their personal happiness. They had created something together that was larger than either of them could have built alone. That evening, they attended a graduation ceremony for participants in one of their job training programs. The ceremony was held in the community center they had built in Elena's old neighborhood, just a few blocks from the apartment where she had once counted coins to buy food. 23 people were graduating that day from programs in everything from computer repair to culinary arts to small business management. Elena watched their faces as they received their certificates, seeing in each of them the same mixture of pride and determination she remembered feeling when she had first started working at Alexander's company. One of the graduates, an older woman named Rosa, approached Elena after the ceremony. "Mrs. Elena, I wanted to thank you personally," Rosa said, her voice emotional. "Rosa, you did all the hard work. I'm proud of you." Rosa shook her head. "You don't understand. 3 years ago, I was where you used to be. I lost my job as a seamstress when the factory closed. I was 57 years old, with no savings and no idea how to start over. I was ready to give up."
Elena listened intently. "But my neighbor told me about your program. She said there was a place where people believed in giving second chances, where they saw potential instead of problems. I almost didn't apply because I thought I was too old, but something made me try." "What are you doing now?" Elena asked. Rosa beamed. "I have my own alterations business. I work from home so I can take care of my elderly mother, and I'm making more money than I ever made at the factory. But more than that, I feel useful again. I feel like I have value." Elena felt tears in her eyes. "Rosa, you always had value. Sometimes we just need the right opportunity to show it." After Rosa walked away, Alexander joined Elena. "Conversations like that never get old, do they?" he said. "Never," Elena agreed. "They remind me why we do this work." As they drove home that night, Elena looked out at the familiar streets of Madrid. So much had changed since that afternoon when she had walked these same streets counting coins. Yet, in some ways, everything important had remained the same. She was still the same person who believed in helping others, who found joy in simple pleasures, who valued genuine connections over material possessions. The difference was that now she had the resources and platform to turn those values into action on a much larger scale. When they arrived home, Elena and Alexander found a surprise waiting for them. Carmen had called earlier to say she was coming by with something special, but she hadn't explained what. They found her in their living room, chatting with their housekeeper Maria and holding a large wrapped package. "Carmen, what's all this?" Elena asked, hugging the older woman. Carmen's eyes were sparkling with excitement. "Elena, Alexander, you know I'm getting old. I've been thinking about what will happen to all the memories and stories from the cafe when I'm no longer around to tell them." They sat down together, curious about what Carmen had been planning. "So, I've been working with a local artist, a young woman who comes to the cafe every day. Together, we've created something I hope you'll like." Carmen unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful painting. It showed the interior of the original cafe, but it was populated with faces from throughout its history. There was Elena, young and worried, placing coins on the counter. There was Alexander, looking surprised and grateful. There were dozens of other people, students, elderly neighbors, young parents, business people, all the regular customers who had made the cafe their second home over the years. But the most remarkable thing about the painting was that it seemed to glow with warmth. The artist had captured not just the physical space, but the feeling of community, of belonging, of kindness exchanged between strangers who had become friends. "Carmen," Elena breathed, "it's incredible." "The artist, her name is Lucia. She's one of your scholarship recipients. She's studying fine arts at the university now. She said she wanted to paint the place that had given her hope when she needed it most." Alexander studied the painting carefully. "Carmen, this belongs in the cafe, where everyone can see it." Carmen shook her head. "No, this one is for you. Lucia is painting another one for the cafe. She said that the story belongs in both places, where it happened and in the home of the people who proved that one small act of kindness can change the world." They hung the painting in their dining room, where they could see it every day during meals. It became a conversation starter when they had guests, a way to share their story and inspire others to look for their own opportunities to make a difference. But perhaps more importantly, it served as a daily reminder of how far they had come and why they continued to do the work they did. Every morning, as Elena had her coffee and planned her day, she would look at the painting and remember that young woman who had been so scared of not having enough, who had given her last coins to help a stranger. That young woman could never have imagined the life Elena was living now, but she would have been proud of what her small act of courage had grown into. As the years continued to pass, Elena and Alexander faced new challenges and opportunities. They navigated economic downturns that made funding more difficult, political changes that affected their international work, and personal challenges, including the loss of Elena's mother and Alexander's father. Through it all, they maintained their commitment to the values that had brought them together, believing in human potential, treating everyone with dignity and respect, and understanding that true wealth came from what you gave, not what you accumulated. The Hope Foundation continued to evolve and grow. They developed new programs, formed partnerships with governments and other nonprofits, and trained thousands of people to replicate their model in communities around the world. But Elena's favorite part of the work remained the individual conversations, the moments when she could sit across from someone whose story reminded her of her own journey and help them see that their current circumstances didn't define their future possibilities. On a quiet afternoon in late spring, nearly a decade after her first meeting with Alexander, Elena was walking through the neighborhood where she had grown up when she noticed a young girl, probably about 8 years old, counting coins outside a small grocery store. The girl looked frustrated and a little sad. Elena approached her gently. "Is everything okay?" Elena asked. The girl looked up at her with serious brown eyes. "I want to buy a birthday present for my mama, but I don't have enough money." Elena's heart clenched with recognition. "What were you hoping to buy?" The girl pointed to a display of flowers near the store entrance. "Those yellow ones. Mama always says yellow flowers make her happy, but they cost €5, and I only have €3.20. Elena smiled and knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" "Isabella." "Isabella, that's a beautiful name. You know what I think?" "What?" "I think your mama would be more happy knowing you wanted to buy her flowers than she would be getting the actual flowers. The love behind the gift is what matters most." Isabella considered this seriously. "But I still want to give her something special." Elena thought for a moment. "Isabella, what if we made a deal? I'll help you buy the flowers, but in return, you have to promise me something." "What?" "You have to promise that someday, when you're older and you see someone who needs help, you'll remember this moment and you'll help them too." Isabella's face lit up. "I promise." They went into the store together, and Elena helped Isabella buy the most beautiful bouquet of yellow flowers. As they walked out, Isabella chattering excitedly about her mother's surprise, Elena realized that the cycle was continuing. This little girl had just experienced unexpected kindness from a stranger, and she had promised to pass it forward. That night, Elena told Alexander about her encounter with Isabella. "You know what I realized?" she said as they sat on their terrace, looking out over the lights of Madrid. "What's that?" "We can create foundations and fund programs and measure impact in spreadsheets, but the real change happens in these small human moments. One person deciding to care about another person, even when there's no obligation to do so." Alexander nodded. "That's always been the heart of what we do, hasn't it? Everything else is just structure to support more of those moments." Elena smiled, thinking about the painting in their dining room, about Carmen's cafe, about Rosa and Sophia and Marcus and Amara, and thousands of others whose lives had been touched by expanding circles of kindness. "I wonder how many stories like ours are starting today," she mused. "How many people are having their own coffee shop moment without even realizing it?" Alexander took her hand. "I hope it's thousands, and I hope each one of them leads to something beautiful." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky above Madrid, Elena felt a deep sense of contentment. She had learned that happiness didn't come from having everything you wanted, but from wanting everything you had. She had learned that true security didn't come from a bank account, but from knowing you were valued and loved. Most importantly, she had learned that the smallest acts of kindness could indeed change the world, one person at a time. The story of Elena and Alexander had become more than just a romance or even a tale of social impact. It had become proof that ordinary people, when they choose kindness over indifference, courage over fear, and generosity over selfishness, can create extraordinary change.
And somewhere in Madrid that evening, in a small apartment not unlike the one where Elena had once lived, a young girl named Isabella was presenting her mother with a bouquet of yellow flowers and telling her about the kind stranger who had helped make it possible, not knowing that she was continuing a story that had begun years earlier with a handful of coins and an act of simple human kindness.